Okay, we're live. Hey, Marjan, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thanks. It's great to have you on. I know we've been speaking for a while about this, so finally we managed to get a time together and to have a chat.
No, it's great to be on the show. I love everything you're doing, and I think it's just so important to have people like you operating in the crypto art scene and art space to sort of educate and inform and connect artists and collectors and curators and platforms. And there's such a need for that, and you're doing such a fantastic job. So thank you, Nicole.
Of course, it's a pleasure. And actually, I would love to start pretty much as I always start, but like, kind of like going a bit back in time, like before NFTs, before crypto art, and really taking a bit of a 360 look at your, life as an artist and what you were doing before and how you got into the space, and just hearing a little bit about your story.
Yeah. Well, I always say my first exhibited computer art piece was done on a Commodore 64 back in 1984 in the East Village in New York. So I've done a lot of different collections of digital art since. I'm obviously a pioneering digital artist going back to the early era. And, I actually, I'm going to run this sort of little video in the background that I usually do when I sort of talk about these, and I'll talk on top so we can have some visuals for a lot of what I'm saying and a lot of the things that I'm working on. So yeah, I mean, actually, this video pretty much starts in the 1990s when I was doing a lot of fractal generated computer animations that I would layer and chop up and assemble together and exhibit in Soho galleries. That's me with the blonde hair, by the way. And I would do them as head immersive early virtual reality infinity mirror installations like this. This is 1995. It's a Synesthesia, the first major computer art exhibition in Soho in New York. And then I would also do them as projected desolid canvases with a fake projected gold frame as total like chaoscape, as in a landscape made up of chaos theory generative animations. And then I would also do them as performance. So I would project them on me while contemplating chaos, which was the popular theory back then. And in terms of cyber theory and media theory, and this was actually a German ZDF show. That's me. And I was a chain smoker. I was also on the early internet. So I was a big part of like Silicon Alley in New York City and doing production. And so that this is actually my Mosaic site. This is before Netscape. And so I was also during, and that's the performance piece with me contemplating chaos. And I then did a virtual version of this. I built my 3D avatar. This is the legendary famous.com gallery, an international forum for the digital arts. You can read about it in the history of the internet. That's me and my 3D avatar. I was the featured artist for the launch. And those are the GIF animations of, I literally recreated that performance piece in 3D, projecting the fractal generative animations. I mean, more fractal generative animations on a humanoid mesh. This was 1996. The Adoration series was the posthumanist work. It was widely exhibited at SIGGRAPH museums, galleries, etc. And then in the brief period in the early 2000s, I did a lot of visual music projects. This is Computer 69. It was an official selection of over 60 festivals in the 2000s. It wasn't a curated exhibition of Armory Show and Art Basel. And this was funded by the Rockefeller Fund and lots of other funding agencies. This is a visual music marathon. I was the featured artist for it. And that was in 2008 or 2009. And some of the visual music, a lot of these were generative. This is, of course, SCAP, which is the first time I started to work with mocap in 2008. This was official selection of SIGGRAPH 2009 and Best of that year, the theatrical program. And it explored post-traumatic stress syndrome. And you're really looking at early mocap here, made out of spheres and energy. And from that, I went into my Of Revolutions collection of large format prints, animated paintings. These were widely exhibited at art centers, at galleries, and museums internationally. And it was about late stage capitalism, feminist themes, and also personal experience that I had with revolutions through the revolution there. And I exhibited this body from roughly around 2010 to 2015. So you're seeing a lot of these different works. And once again, using a lot of mocap and using some of my abstracted 3D CG figures as a type of digital embodiment, and visualizing the important ideas of our time as in terms of changes that humanity was undergoing through these aesthetic styles of digital art hacks. Starting in 2016, I started to hack my exhibition footage on the internet as a way of radicalizing curating exhibition space. Um, and of course, bringing my critical discourse to the space. And I really took an open approach in the beginning. Like this was actually the shattering of America in 2016 when Donald Trump got elected. This is non-binary nude glitch at the Gagosian show in 2016, which is a landmark survey of 100 years of the nude, but there was no non-binary and no digital nude, so that's why I hacked my art into it. So there is this sort of interventionist quality. This is from the Wrong Digital Art Biennially non-binary nude glitch and generative fractal filigree. And so the art hack started to really develop. I sort of came up with this technique of chronometric sculpture where I started to push the body mesh beyond the humanoid boundary. I think before I was just sort of still abstracting within the human boundary. Around the time when I started to push way beyond anything that could be recognized as a humanoid mesh. And I think that for me, this was really kind of like our full transition to the digital, whereas before we were intermediate. I feel like at some point we became fully immersed in this sort of hybrid mixed reality state. And so these bodies started to really follow the order of the human imagination. Of course, obviously elements of meme culture, whatever was happening in a socio-political context, also made it into my work. This is the glitch goddess who resists a singular form, and she goes from slender to heavy. This Martinez did the kiss with millions of views and shares on all the top art channels on Instagram and Facebook. And it really spoke to so many women. That was what was astonishing to me. And this one also, actually, that's Dwayne Hanson's sculpture there. One of the first people who put a comment on this was Dwayne Hanson's daughter. And she said, I absolutely love this, and my father would have absolutely loved this. And I was like, how awesome is that? Because I really admired Dwayne Hanson. So at one point, I did hack her into the fashion runway with J-Lo, and she did the Versace show. This was actually Armory Show 2020, right before the pandemic. And that's kind of when this figure was born, American Purple. And to me, it sort of seemed like the internet was this war of the left and right, and that idea visually and color wise started to work its way. I should also mention a lot of the AR work I've done. This is the commission I did for the Smithsonian from the house. It was funded by the Halcyon Foundation and curated by Art Deck House. This was also in 2018, and I did Autonomous, which is this chronometric sculpture. For individuals' pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. That was the theme. And this is my spine figure, which is loosely based on contemporary German philosopher Sloterdijk's work. These are the glitch goddesses as AR. This is an actual in-app recording, stepping out of the prints on exhibition at various galleries. There's the voiceover was all the comments the women made on the viral post off the internet. So it sort of like has this aggregated internet sort of quality to it. And that's the sculpture Digital Fae. I'm actually doing a drop a little later this season on Institute with Digital Fae. And I'm doing another Snap 3.0 public art exhibition. Also, I was also Adobe's artist in resident for Aero, and you can read all about it, Best of AR 2019 Forbes. This is actually last fall when I exhibited some of these works at Art of Our Century in New York City, a gallery in Manhattan. And this was my Genesis NFT piece, which since has, which actually is still on exhibit, actually, History of Digital Art and NFT Art at the Francisco Carillonum in Linz, Austria, first NFT IRL museum exhibition. This is currently with the Pribrat, I think. Yeah. And it's changed hands a few times. And to Super Rare September 2020, and that was like the first time I entered the NFT world. And I put in my art hack of, as you can see, I changed the content on the Art Basel webpage to make it copyright kosher. And I was like really fascinated by this whole, all these like ETH symbols and all the NFT art. And I really wanted to kind of play with that sculpturally and artistically. And I noticed, here's this, like, the dollar is such an organic rounded thing, and ETH is such a machine technological thing. And I love that transition and the way we're sort of going from the organic and the physical to the machine and the virtual and digital. My Lordesses, of course, are some of my favorite NFT pieces. And I also feel like they're like my strongest sort of fine arts work in terms of my chronometric sculpture technique. This is Lourdes drop with GAN generated voxelized painting in the background. I did do a version of my kiss. I think that's kind of where it ends, or did we stall? Yeah. Anyway, so I think we sort of stalled. Hold on. No, actually, the video's over. That's what happened. And since then, I've done a total of 7 NFTs on Super Rare, and they've all sold to various top collections on Super Rare, and which actually brings us to the anniversary piece I did. So I'm going to do a little setup on this. So I noticed that a lot of people would celebrate in the NFT space with a special piece. So some what to observe this last year, artistic. I'm also very much, an intellectual. In addition to being a digital artist, I'm a tenured full professor. Really about reflecting on our time and our moment from a critical position. To do a piece that, hey, here I am, you're nothing wrong with that. But I really wanted to pause and reflect and to create art from that position that was meaningful and spoke to what happened in this last year, not just on a personal level, but also on a global level. And that's when I decided to do the quarantine cycle. So why don't we let me just get the audio up on it. Sorry. And share desktop again.
Let's go for it.
What?
Let's do it. Let's see it.
Okay. So here's the piece. Hold on. Hold on. We're not getting the audio. Wow.
Do you have it on your side?
No, it's somehow not playing, even though I have the audio up. Oh well.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
a
not
lot of
hearing
these.
audio.
Yeah. I'm not sure what's going on, but
And this
yeah.
is your
So
anniversary piece on
called,
Super Rare, right?
it's
So
called
1 year.
1 year on, yeah, and it's called the quarantine cycles. It's based on an earlier quarantine cycles piece I had done August 2020, and it was all about the lockdown. Um, and it's based on that, and it's called a triptych because it's in 3 parts. So the first part, she's glitching and oscillating, and so is the furniture. So that was kind of like, to me, the beginning of the lockdown. And then in the middle, there is this sort of like total virtuality. Her cereal bowl sort of throws up emojis on her face, and the clock, time, and face, everything melts into, motion media and rise of virtuality, the blue and red figures running around. So the middle part is really about us really going full on virtual almost during this lockdown. And then Bitcoin and ETH are chasing each other in the background, which is to some extent the rise of cryptocurrencies as we're making this full on transition to virtuality due to the pandemic. And the end is this sort of like total transformation, levitation, outer space, zero G kind of state, which is that right up to like around the time I was finishing this piece, thus the triptych. So I just minted this and put it on super rare. And like I said, for me, it was really important to not just celebrate the anniversary, but use it for pause, reflection, and commentary on everything that's happened since last September and my entry into NFTs. Obviously, for me personally, and my personal favorite figure in that is what I call the Pajama Girl escaping the pajama, because there were so many days where that to me was like almost the imagine.
Reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, get me out of this, you know. I don't know how many people
um,
can identify with that, but that was just like my little sneaky. There's a lot of other little embedded sort of commentaries in the whole piece. The piece is designed for continuous viewing with many layers of meaning. So,
I mean, we've seen like your kind of like your whole career, and you've done like so much, but also I think like something that I like to kind of like stop on is like the presence of computer art and digital art before NFTs. And, we're talking here, you talked about like the 90s, right? And how, you were experimenting with the .com and you were doing like computer-based art and you're doing installation. So I'd love to really like take some time to like almost do a bit of a step back into like art history and like understand how the importance of digital artists being present before NFTs
yeah,
is essential even for the space to grow in now in a sustainable way, let's say.
yeah, you bring up an excellent point. I mean, obviously, digital artists such as myself and many others have existed for a very long time. But I always say we were like kind of like the bastard children of the. And I've said this publicly, and I will say it again. We never even received the respect of photographers or performance artists or video artists. And I mean, almost any dealer will tell you that, whether it was in terms of the amounts of the work that was sold, or public art commissions, or the major grants, etc. I mean, I'm lucky that I've had a few of these things, but if you consider I've been making digital art for almost 4 decades, that's not a lot. You know,
Mm,
you have to really contextualize it. If I was
yeah.
doing any other media and or mediums, it would be very different. So I always feel very strongly about saying that the amazing thing that NFTs have happened, and it doesn't matter whether you personally like people's work or not. To me, that's inconsequential. You have to acknowledge that by selling for $69 million, he has completely legitimized the medium in one single day. The medium became a respected, valid medium for collecting fine arts in ways that, technically speaking, it was always on the fringes and on the side. And, and selling it was always an ordeal and a nightmare. Most of my digital art over the course of the decades was free. It's just like doing free work. I mean, that's really what it was. Most of the money I made was from doing commercial production work as a digital artist, and also teaching and doing branding videos and things of that kind. And so I always felt like my joke is I was like a digital Robin Hood, doing production gigs to pay for my art, because there was no such thing as the art pays for itself. The art didn't pay for itself. I did it as a labor of love. I did it because I believed in it, and I did it because this is kind of who and what I'm about. But NFTs are like probably, I wish people would understand and appreciate what a huge role NFTs are playing in terms of art history. And you brought that up, that it isn't just about the bored apes. Not that I'm dissing the bored apes, but I'm saying the potential is so much greater. First of all, shifting to digital art as a valid medium for the fine arts is as significant as early modernism. Many of the styles of 3D CG that were poo-pooed off by the galleries in the past that are now permeating the NFT space are also like early modernism. A lot of people compare what I do, and if you read the comments on social media, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're like the Picasso of 3D." But on some levels, yes, every watershed era, the artists define humanity through their art. If you look at the beginning, if you look at 1920s art, you look at Cubism and Art Deco, you will see the Roaring Twenties. You will see the rise of Wall Street. You will see the Industrial Revolution. You will see the birth of radio, and you will see that visually in the art. And on some levels, that's what we now have to do.
Of course, yeah.
To capture that moment. Yeah. So NFTs are really, for me, playing a significant part art historically in that regards too.
It's interesting because it's almost like talking about like history and like art history. It's almost like we're in like a new moment of art history, but at the same time, we're also learning about a lot of art that already existed and happened and was there, but just wasn't relevant or wasn't, yeah, like wasn't valued. Let's say maybe it's the best word to say, valued.
That's always the case. I mean, the Renaissance didn't become a Renaissance until 100 years later. And some would even argue it wasn't until Panofsky came along, the art historian, who made the Renaissance into what it was. That took, what, 2 centuries? So same with like Cubism. I mean, the total number of people who knew what Cubism was in the 20s was very small.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a very small group that knew what Braque and Picasso were doing with Cubism, let's say. So it's the same with Paris in the 30s. It was a niche group, just like the cool Discord servers today. It's a small niche group. And they say, history's made 50 years into the future. So yeah, more people are going to find out about this moment and all its little niche whatevers in the future. Probably, but I don't think it's going to be 50 years into the future because, Ray Sharkey, the Digerati from NYU, has this definition of the inherent tendency of the technology. And he says that the inherent tendency of the technology is towards speed and efficiency. So everything becomes efficient and faster. So you can disseminate and sell art much faster and much more efficiently through NFTs as opposed to gallery art fair system. How many art fairs are there a year? NFTs happen every day. The NFT world is changing. So what used to take if it took the Renaissance 200 years to become a global phenomenon, that today might be 20 years. So I don't think we're going to have to wait as long as the modernists did to have this moment recognized and appreciated art historically. I think it might happen within a course of as early as a decade. But it's not happening at this moment. Remember, art is not, it's like the art of this moment, whatever's popular in this moment may turn out to be the ephemera that disappears. And it's the stuff that most people don't know about that has lasting power for all the reasons that works of art develop lasting power. It's that stuff that's going to start shining down the line.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like if you like something that I kind of tend to think about is, at the moment we can say that the real interest still pretty much within like the ecosystem of NFTs is within like collectibles and like quick kind of like trading of these projects. Obviously, like there's a niche that talks about art and do it fabulously, but I do think it's a niche still. And like a lot of these people like Jason Bailey, like Moghaddam, a lot of these kind of like curators that have been around in the space for a while that bring the art to life are not that, let's say, popular, one might say, like in comparison to talking about collectibles and stuff like that. And I do think that the space will kind of catch up, but maybe not. Maybe like that's also how it works within the space as well. Like I always tend to divide like collectibles, like NFTs and crypto art. I think like it's two different things. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that, but I think that split has always existed. I mean, I kind of was like a veteran of the 1980s, and and I was the resident video artist at the Pyramid Club, and I did a lot of my early electronic art there. And there's that video that everybody sees on YouTube, drag queen skinheads and some girls, which I did from the 80s. But so I remember the East Village art scene, and we were all like maybe 100. There was like 100 of us, and maybe 300 people knew about us, right? And then a couple of blocks over, you had Soho, And you had like Donald Judd cubes, and I mean, you had art that was like the polar opposite of like what we were all doing in the East Village. But when you sort of look back at that era, that the 70s conceptual minimalist art, interestingly enough, has had very little lasting impact. But Jean-Michel Basquiat, Fat Fight Freddy, Keith Haring, I mean, come on, David Wojnarowicz, the East Village neo-expressionism, as it was called then. Even in Italy, you had the neo-expressionist painters, Francesco Clemente, etc. I think that whole generation of artists, look at how huge their impact has been culturally, art historically, and of course in terms of the market value. So, and there were a lot of people buying art in the 80s, but they were just like buying things that look like pretty abstract art, or some study up the figure. I mean, they were buying very, very traditional concepts of what a piece of art you're going to hang on your wall is. So to me, that's very similar to what is happening now. Most of the NFTs that are sold and most of the NFTs that are bought, they're the idea that these collectibles will increase in value, maybe 1% will. Because collectibles by their nature are oftentimes enough ephemeral. So what isn't ephemeral? Well, great art isn't. Great art will endure, and it'll endure beyond this market cycle and the next market cycle. And it will also increase a lot more.
What do you think is the definition of great art?
I can't give you the because I don't deal with that. I can give you my definition.
Yeah, of course, your definition. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you what my guiding ideal is, what my rubric is, and I always say that I'm a type of machine learning too, as a biochemical, mimetic, and genetic construct. But I'm a result of 14 billion years of cosmological, geological, genetic, and mimetic evolution as machine learning goes. Whenever people go, oh, I trained this GAN on these 4 paintings and it's doing art, like, that's nice. I make art as a result of 14 billion years of training, okay? It's like, that's a human artist. Now, the next interesting question becomes, is my art unique? Yes, on some fundamental level, my art is as unique as my fingerprints. But if you look at fingerprints, they all pretty much fundamentally look the same. So there's a level of originality in what you create that's very much about self-similarity and patterns and iteration. And an awful lot of art is about copy art, as they say, or iteration or self-similarity. I'm looking for singularities. I'm looking for that thing that has never been seen before. It's like that's been the number one driving force in my life. And on some levels, part of the reason my 3D CG work looks the way it does is because if my 3D CG work looks like something else, I won't do it. I just won't. It's like viscerally, I have a reaction against it. So for me, it's really about creating those aesthetic singularities, the visuals that haven't been seen before on the one hand, but are also very much informed by this moment and the being within this moment. Mm-hmm. And for me, that being is, of course, always a personal and individual experience. But to me, there's an aspect of being that happens through our aggregated experience of the internet. So it's a sort of a simultaneous individual and collective state of being in this moment. So it has to be informed by that. And the other aspect of what for me is great art is that I have to have these layers of meaning and understanding that are profound, because I'm very much interested in the profound and the sublime. So those are like the 3 things that I would say for me constitute great art.
Do you think that with the development of tools and machines and computers and technology, which in one way facilitates making art or accessing any kind of app or tool that can allow pretty much a lot of people to create, devalues or changes the way that people see what good art, great art in general is?
It's an interesting question. I mean, we know that mimetically speaking, the clickbait and eyeball economy and junk food culture of the internet has to some extent created a very superficial culture, and actually critiques of it refer to it as the flat technology creates flatness in culture. And the idea of the flatness is that the same way that 2D screens flatten Euclidean space and give us a representation of space without necessarily delivering the nuance and complexity of physical space, a similar phenomenon happens with culture, where everything's shrunk down to something you're going to look at for a fraction of a second in your newsfeed, or every complex idea is reduced to a 50 character clickbait headline. So but humanity has cultural needs that go beyond clickbait. The same way, you can't live on junk food without paying a price, physically, health wise. And I think there's a psychological counterpart to that. We need to process information in a more substantial way than, the sort of eyeball economy of the internet. And that's where culture and the great cultural works from literature, music, art, performance, etc. That's where they come from. That's how we collectively process the complex information of our world and society. But the question is, where does that now go? Legacy art is showing 20th century artistic and curatorial practices that are no longer relevant. The internet is all about getting eyeballs. There's very little substantial dialogue. Here, I think NFTs and crypto art, by creating new cultural funded spaces and through the patronage system, can actually, counter some of that.
You mentioned patronage system, which is interesting. I was
Did you
sorry,
just?
I muted myself. I was actually reading an article the other day, I think it was yesterday, around how crypto and in general, like blockchain, can enable like automatic kind of patronage into like public art spaces, museums, and all of that. Is that kind of what you
Yeah,
mean? Yeah.
actually, that's perfect timing for me to talk about the Junos for Institute, because that's part of the whole concept behind the piece, the DeFi revolution, and everything it can potentially change. So, I'm very happy to be part of NFTism, No Fear in Trying, inaugural exhibition for the launch of the art world's first NFT institute in London from the awesome team Unit London, Joe and Johnny. And the NFTism No Fear in Flying is curated by Kenny Schachter. And there were these two awesome openings in Covent Garden in London, for first the opening and also the launch of the platform. And I've been sharing a lot of that content on my Twitter. And there's a really beautiful, exquisitely beautiful. Actually, why don't I just quickly run that while I'm talking about this? Let me just share the desktop. Yeah, so there was this really yeah, there was this really awesome show in Arium Spaces, Metaverse show of 100 artists, some traditional, some digital. And this is, of course, Arium Spaces. And my whole concept behind Juno Moneta, and that's me trying to navigate through the second floor. Hold on a second. But yeah, I got a little. I actually talked to the Arium Spaces team about, an elevator to the second floor. But anyways, because there's an up in crypto voxels, and I just was hoping the same keyboard shortcut worked here, and it didn't. Anyways, but ignore my bad, VR driving here, but my bad WSD. But Juno Moneta, interestingly enough, was the presiding deity for the fort where the Roman Empire minted its money. And it's the origins of both the word money and minting, moneta. That's actually the English word money and minting. The etymology of that's where it comes from. Now, the interesting part of the Roman Empire was that it connected the existing trade routes of the Silk Road in Asia and Africa with the new road work that the Roman Empire established in Europe. So it sort of became the first three-continent version of the global economy: Asia, Africa, and Europe. And it was run through nation states and imperial states. that protected the trade and were, as a result, in charge of the trade and the economy. This is to a large extent the system we still have in our world today. We literally inherited it from that moment of the minting of money, and which brings us to today. But today we now have an alternative system evolving and as a disruption, and that's DeFi and decentralized finance, moving beyond nation states, creating opportunity for everyone, independent of established governments and institutions. This, on the one hand, is incredibly exciting in terms of its potential. It's also terrifying, as some people have pointed out. I agree, there's potential for both good and bad here. And so, to me, the blockchain and NFTs, I mean, on some levels, NFT art is the cultural counterpart to this fundamental global revolution that is happening now, that can potentially change how we work, how we live, how we function. And so glitching Juno monetas, these four NFTs that I've created, and these are all generative glitches in 3D CG. And by the way, the generative system that I'm using here has a randomizer seed. So if I preview the animation again or render it again, it won't be the same. It'll be slightly different. So these are, I have to emphasize, these are technologically unique, cannot be replicated. This render is it. I can't render this again. I can render it again, but it'll be slightly different each time. So anyway, so the idea of glitching this bust of the deity, Juno Moneta, was it's about glitching this existing imperial order of the Roman Empire, which we still have in our world today, as nation states governing finance, economy, institutions, and creating monopolies and oligarchies that have locked up entire markets and access to those markets by everyone. You look at how much crypto has opened up markets to, I teach at a college, and half my students are crypto investors. And these are really, really young people with, they inherit a little bit of money and they invested in crypto. They're like completely sold on this. Their generation, it's like, this is us. And I'll tell you why. Because if you talk to them, this is what they will tell you. They genuinely believe they have no other opportunities. They genuinely believe the system will not give them any opportunity. But they've projected all their dreams and hopes and aspirations onto crypto. And they believe that crypto will deliver those opportunities to them. And they're immensely excited by the possibilities of NFT because they see a future of work for themselves in that vision, but they don't see a future of work for themselves in this established legacy world order of the economy.
And you mentioned like you're teaching at university. Like, first of all, like what do you teach exactly? And also, has anything in the way, that you're teaching changed since you've kind of come into the space, and like the way that you're approaching, the ecosystem in general, like the art ecosystem?
Yeah. Well, I'm a tenured full professor of computer graphics, animation, and XR. And I, over the course of the years, I've taught everything from 3D modeling and 3D animation to advanced Photoshop to, motion graphics, AR, VR. So, I sort of teach whatever my schedule is this semester is my joke. But and that what has changed is in the last year, I've brought a lot of this sort of conversation we just had into the classroom. And I have to tell you, half the room hates NFTs, hates blockchains, hates crypto. They don't know anything about it except for they hate it. The other half are like, the other half are evangelists of like the highest order. So I think it's funny how this generation is now sort of split in that regards. But yeah, I do bring that conversation. It does come up. And we've had some interesting debates. I think last spring we had a little bit of tension between the group that was vehemently opposed to crypto because of the carbon footprint and the group that was making very strong arguments about, I'm an artist and I want to make a living. And they were like this about it. And it was like I had to kind of, relegate. I had to act as the referee. I'm a very much a heterodox thinker, so I allow any kind of conversation in my classes. I very much believe in academic freedom, but I sort of allowed both sides to speak because I think it's like they're both right on some levels. These are all the different things we need to think about. But I just also wanted to sort of quickly share each individual Juno. Yeah, this is this first Juno because I wanted to talk about each NFT in this case. The Black Juno, notice all the glitches are kind of rounded. And so with this one, it's really about the sort of global, spherical aspect of this disruption that's happening. And by the way, in the middle of each one of these loops, notice there's a generative gold pattern veining that appears through the sculpture, and that's to symbolize mining. And then with the blue Juno, the whole idea with the blue Juno is that there's like these sort of, oops, my bad, I shouldn't have minimized that. With the blue Juno, there's this whole idea of like the big glitches that you see in the volume and the smaller, minuscule glitches and medium-sized ones. And to me, that's sort of like very much the scalar relationship between the big powers and the small powers operating on this dynamic system. And with the glitching Juno Moneta in Peachy Mocha, my favorite new name for a color, which I had to invent. In Peachy Mocha, I just love the word, the term, and the color. But with her, what I did was I was thinking of swirls and other types of movements within fluid systems and natural systems and organic systems, and almost freezing that into the materiality of stone and sculpture. So that's kind of what she's about. And yeah, I absolutely love some of the. I feel like some all four of these Junos. Honestly, I could hit 3D print on each and every single one of them as a standalone sculpture. That's how I feel about it. I mean, that's like another ideal I have in animation, that every frame stand and perform on its own as a work of art. But and this last one, which is the glitching Juno Moneta in red, the awesome thing about her is that there's the glitching is occurring across the verticality, which is sort of like the vertical order of hierarchies, and then there's a sort of rhizomatic push laterally and horizontally. So that's basically all four of them. So,
and you mentioned before that each generation is completely randomized, right? So it will never.
Well, there's a lot of modifiers I'm using on these, not just one, but one of them is the generative system that has a randomizer seed, and that's the one that changes, that literally renders a slightly different result every time you build the modifier preview animation or render it. Yeah. So
Awesome.
this is a nightmare for me as a 3D CG artist, because I'm like the queen of go back and change this part and that, and I couldn't. I mean, I had to really do these as one shot with all the beauty passes, and if it didn't work, it was a total re-render with all the beauty passes. There was no such thing as go back and just fix this part or that. It was impossible. So, and for me, the hassle is like if somebody says, "Oh, I want this frame as a print or a sculpture," it's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to be able to do it.
These are all one-on-ones, right? On Institute.
Yeah, these are all one-on-ones. They go on auction Monday, this Monday, this coming Monday, the 26th. No, is it the 26th or the 27th? Let me double check the date. It's Monday the 27th on institute.co platform from Unit London. There's four of them: the black, the blue, the peachy mocha, and the red. And it's about glitching moneta, the origins of money and minting with the DeFi revolution, Web 3.0, the metaverse, and everything that's happening in our world as a work of chronometric sculpture.
Awesome. And am I right in saying that you only tokenize on Super Rare before, right? And now Institute?
Yeah, actually, no, I did do one show with Accelerant Art and White Hot Magazine on Chainsaw NFT on Chainsaw back in June. And I also I'm talking to the new curator at Maker's Place, and I'm very excited about that. I might be doing some stills with physical prints
Oh,
at
nice.
one of. And yeah, I've sort of been going a little slow. You know, I haven't really sort of said, oh, here's like every JPEG and MP4 file I have on my hard disk and put it on every platform. I haven't quite done that, and I'm not sure if I'm that kind of an artist. So what I've done is sort of I've felt my way through this because I'm not an NFT artist. I'm a digital artist, and NFTs to me are just a new form, like every other form I've ever worked with. So you know, for me, it's important for me to maintain the practice and find organically ways that my practice can continue to grow and evolve with this new form.
Absolutely. And it's something that I also wanted to ask you, like obviously you've been also pretty much like a pioneer of like AR and VR, which in many like from some perspectives it might be something that like artists, like I work with a lot of like emerging artists or artists that are coming like in the space, is something that they haven't had the possibility to experience with yet. And now that they are kind of coming into the metaverse where, you know, AR and VR are much more even just common like words that you can speak and you hear and you see and you read, um, it's a practice that, you know, artists might be interested in. Is it something that you think is native or is perfect for the medium or sits within the medium well? What are your thoughts about that?
It's a tough thing. I mean, I'm actually doing a pretty large scale public art commission in the UK right now with AR with Hillsborough Castle Park. I'm, I'm
Nice.
I'm 3D actually right after this. I have to talk to the fabricators I literally I'm doing physical sculpture and it's been CNC milled from my digital file, but we have to go over the finishing stuff and my meeting is right after this. But so I'm doing physical permanent sculpture from a digital figure of mine and an AR component. That's permanent AR. There's actually a budget for keeping the AR going, you know, which is a really huge deal. So I'm actually, and I'm doing Snap 3.0 in Orlando, Florida later as well. And so I'm doing a lot of AR commissions, but I don't know to what extent AR NFTs are performing. I think on a really basic level, you have to seriously deal with this idea that people who buy NFTs want to be able to show those NFTs to the highest number of people possible. That's part of the collective incentive. And the biggest problem with I think AR is it's sort of the mobile nature of it. I mean, outside of sharing the videos, which sometimes don't perform as well metrically, you know, because they're
Yeah.
mobile screen grabs and they're just never going to perform. So AR NFTs have been tricky. I've been monitoring that market carefully, and I don't know to what extent you can say it's outperforming JPEG and MP4 NFTs.
I know.
I mean, like you look at a lot of platforms have GLBs that you can sort of spin around inside of a GLB viewer as 3D, but those also don't perform as well as JPEG. I mean, right now JPEGs outperform everything else. You have to sort of accept that the mass aspect of JPEG is to a large extent the driving force before why it's outperforming everything else.
And talking about, you know, collections and like collectors and like that relationship between, you know, an artist and a collector, like obviously you've kind of experienced, you know, going through galleries, like going through like public spaces, doing commissions. How is that relationship different here, and what are some of the things that you particularly maybe like enjoy or not enjoy about the two?
I think the biggest difference is the collectors I've had IRL are people who talk to me in person. They usually want to meet me. Sometimes they don't. Or if they're not in New York, we meet online. They add me on their social media. I get to see them. I get to see the work in their homes, you know. So it becomes very something about the physical world, art of collecting, um, kind of brings you very close to collectors. You know, you get to see their homes, you get to see their private social media, things of that kind. NFT space, I can safely say I don't know. You know, I don't have that it isn't like that. I don't even know what these people's real names are. You know? I'm like, who is Flamingo DAO? I mean, it's a group of investors. What are their names? I have no idea. I mean, you know, it's like that. So even though you might be getting like on their Discord servers, and you know, having these great conversations with them individually, their collector friends, and all the other artists who are on the Discord server. And there's a certain level of intimacy to that, going beyond crypto Twitter, let's say, jumping into a private Discord server. You know, it's kind of like going for drinks after the opening. So,
Yeah, it's kind of true.
no, that's really, you got to kind of follow the gallery model. But so it does feel like that, but it isn't, but you still don't know who these people are. I mean, everybody knows who I am because I'm my own, you know, I mean, I am, there's only one identity and that's me. But with a lot of crypto collectors, I think there's still this layer of anonymity, which I fully respect. I don't think, you know, I mean, Cosimo just came out as Snoop Dogg, Cosimo Medici. So maybe that's a new thing where people will reveal their identities. I'm kind of used to handles though, because I feel like the entire history of the internet is that. Because you know, I used to be on the early IRC channels, and in the early IRC and email, it wasn't until the 90s. It wasn't until 1999 or 2000 when people started to use their real names
Yeah,
on
that's true.
the internet. That just did not exist. So maybe the crypto is similar, where it's going to be handles for a very long time, and then people will slowly switch to real names.
Do you think and maybe this you know, can, like, we can also wrap it up. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you have a call after, but do you think that physical will still be a thing, like physical exhibitions, you know, in real life? Or do you think the more and more we go into this, and I'm not talking, you know, 2 years from now, I'm talking more like long term, will like the physical side kind of like go slowly, like go away?
No, I think people, well, people have, I think the people who collect physical art for their homes, offices, interior spaces, whatever you want to call it, will continue to have that need. I don't think that need is going away. But whereas before that need defined much of the fine arts market, that's no longer going to define the bulk of the fine arts market,
Mm.
because the fine arts market is now expanded with digital. And so it's not going away, but the market itself is getting bigger, and it will include crypto and NFT and digital a lot more.
And one last question for you before we close. What are you more excited about, or what are you looking forward to seeing in the space and more of, let's say?
I feel like I do very, very serious art. You know, even if I do something that's ironic or whimsical, there's many layers. Like even when I did the crypto art writing the bull behind you, I was interviewed by two art historians from, you know, Agora Digital Art in London. And one of the art historians looked at me and she said, "Were you working with the bull as a patriarchal symbol as well?" I said, "Of course." But I mean, you know, that's the conversation I love, you know, because yeah, there's one layer is the Wall Street bull, um, but there's another layer of meaning that's much older than Wall Street as a symbol, as semiotic. So I deal with that a lot in my work, and what I like to see is more dialogue about the crypto art that is, let's say, of the kind I do. Not that there's anything wrong with the other approaches, because I'm a big egalitarian type artist. I believe in diversity, but I don't feel sometimes as if we have enough venues where you can look at these works that go further, that have this dialogue, and to have that. I mean, you look at any important and significant art movement, it had a salon. It had what did the old line used to be. It took an art collector, a dealer, and an art critic to create an art movement. But there was this sort of synergy and conversation that created the great art movements. And I don't think that conversation is the Twitter thread about bored apes. You know what I'm saying? I think while that it may be an important conversation as NFT investments go, it's not the kind of conversation I'm talking about. So what I'd like to see is the development of real art criticism within the space, the language and ideas that are necessary for the new art theory to emerge for this, and ways of connecting curators, the art critics and theory people, and collectors and the artists together to evolve the end of the ecosystem that's about more substantial works of art.
I completely agree. Absolutely. Marjan, thank you so much. This
Thank you,
was
Nicole. This has been so
amazing.
awesome.
And I hope to have you on soon again.
Awesome, definitely. And let's do cool things together too.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye bye.